What's up, everyone? Welcome on in to the very first episode of DJMMA, where we will be breaking down everything on the state of the UFC, from upcoming fights and bets to thoughts on, certain divisions, the judges, the scoring system. We're going to start covering everything UFC right here on DJMMA a couple times each and every week. For those of you who don't already know me, I'm Jack Bushman. I host the Lockdown Blackhawks podcast and also co-host On Tap Golf. And as if I didn't need another thing on my slate, I have decided to start up a UFC podcast with none other than my good friend DJ Postilion. And folks, if it wasn't for this sick bastard right over here, I would have no idea literally about anything UFC. But probably about a year and a half ago now, some way or another, he really got me sucked into it. And I've gone from literally knowing nothing to having enough confidence to start up the show with you, buddy. But for those of you listening, this is the brain of the operations. I guess I should, right here, I should point that way. I'm still learning with each and every day, but, this sick bastard's been no life in his Saturdays for the last handful of years. So, DJ, thanks for joining me today, man. I'm excited to start doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Talk to me about kind of how you've gotten to this point, your UFC fandom, and what led you to wanting to do this podcast with me, brother?
Yeah, no, I've been a fan of the sport for years. I mean, I've been watching every Saturday for God knows how long. I think I originally started when I was originally a WWE fan back in the day. When Brock Lesnar came over and he fought, I think, Keith Haring the first time. That's when I started watching. I just wanted to, I want to see how he did. I didn't really care so much about the UFC. It was more kind of like my love for WWE and Brock Lesnar. And he came over, he made a splash, he became the champion, and then I kind of started, watching from there. And ever since then, I've been kind of hooked. It's real. Storylines are just like the WWE. Everything's real. So it's real WWE. That's kind of how I looked at it as a kid. And now I'm 25, turning 26, and I love the sport. It's my favorite sport in the world. It's the best sport to bet on. The adrenaline rush with betting every single, fight. It's great. There's nothing like it, and I'm happy to do this. I love this game so much, and I'm just happy to be able to spew my useless knowledge.
Absolutely, bro. Glad we found you a spot to do so. And you referenced the betting, that obviously, with it being legal in Illinois the last couple of years, and that was a huge part in getting me into it as well. And in 2022, not to kind of pump air in our tires a little bit here, but a big part of us starting this podcast too, and what we'll be doing a lot more of on these episodes, not so much on this first one, is the UFC Fight Night card to kick off 2023 isn't exactly the best, to say the least. But a lot of what the show is going to be is just going to be talking about some thoughts and ideas on bets and gambling lines each and every week, and just certain ways that we can try and make money. Because in 2022, we had a really successful year. Deej, I don't know if you have your Action Network account up right now, but
yeah, I don't have it up right now, but we went up 21 units this year. So 21, like 0.8 or something like that. But yeah, we were booming this year. I mean, everything was hitting. I mean, if we had a rough night, we probably lost 1 or 2 bets at the most. So yeah, we've been booming. I think what we know and what we've experienced throughout betting lines and UFC and injuries is something to really account for too. Knowing how these guys are feeling before they go into the fight is very important. And I think betting lines don't share that as much as they should, because a lot of people don't know. And we kind of have some, intel here and there. Just based off watching and based off, interviews, everything going on, talking, as much people as we can. But yeah, no, we know what we're doing. There's proof in the pudding, and we've been hitting. And I think 2023 is going to be a big year. We're upping our units. We're going big, and we're going to make some more money this year. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, DJ's starting to bet with some actual big boy money this year. I'm
pretty big boy money this year. No more $25, $50 bets.
Yeah, things went well last year, so that definitely has me confident. I really like the process that we've been going through. I mean, obviously, you're way more knowledgeable than I am, and you're way more up to date as what's been going on with everybody in their last handful of fights. And kind of me going back and researching it myself to kind of just give it a second look. I think it's been, working pretty well for us. So hopefully that can carry on over here in 2023. And, you know, we can start this podcast off making some money. I don't know if that's going to happen much this week because, again, I don't know if we have any action at all. We'll kind of get into that a little bit later. But getting into it now, folks. One thing I did want to add as well. You said the proof is in the pudding, DJ. We're going to post our Action Network account to give those listening confirmation that, you know, we're not just two jabronis over here. We did have a pretty successful year last year. But, you know, DJ, both me and you have a pretty incredible background in one mixed martial art in the fine sport of wrestling, which anyone who knows me or you in our personal lives will really enjoy the story. But DJ, I'm throwing myself under the bus here as much as
do it. It's part of my life.
This guy right here, 8th grade year. I will say you were team captain, baby. Starting off the year hot.
The Donald Trump effect.
There was a lot of potential for the kid. 8th grade year winds up going 0-16 in the regular season in wrestling. Did pick up a win at regionals, though. A big time win. I was here for it. It was epic. One lose the match to finish the year 1-17. But to add insult to injury, me and DJ wrestled once the year before, and he pinned me within a minute. So we obviously.
You don't want to go against your best friend. You really don't.
Not a fun experience, but obviously we have some real extensive backgrounds in these mixed martial arts. So you guys are clearly in good hands. In all seriousness, though, I really do trust in our process with what we did last year, DJ. And I'm excited to do this with you each and every week, bro. And hopefully we can make money along the way.
Yeah, let's do it.
Without further ado, brother, like I said, we're not going to talk too much about the UFC Fight Night card. We will maybe a little bit at the end of the show if we have some time, but with this being the very first show also of DJMMA and this coming out just before the first card of the year, I thought a good topic for this opening show would be talking about some of the top fights and the biggest moments from last year as we start to kick off the new year. But I also want to talk about first, DJ, the current state that the UFC is in right now, because while they've had a few week hiatus here for the holidays, anyone who really has been following the sport knows it ended kind of in a wacky way. The most notable one, of course, is the Paddy Pimblett decision, where me and you were watching it together and literally were in awe. I mean, it could have been 30-27 Gordon just as easily. But I also think, you know, even the Ankalaev and the Yan fight, not even it being a draw, I was obviously upset with that decision. But the way that Dana White responded in his post-fight interview about it, saying it was a terrible fight and saying, don't trust the judges. I've been telling you that for years. It's just so frustrating to hear like that UFC, as great of a sport as it is, and I've fallen in love watching it in the last year and a half. It's mind-blowing that they still have these like breakdowns and errors in the scoring system and how the sport is ran. Like, what are we doing here, DJ?
Yeah, no, it's a big problem. The scoring is definitely a problem. I mean, we use the boxing system, the 10-9 system, which has been outdated for years. Even in boxing alone, I think it's outdated in boxing too. They have 12 rounds. We have 3 rounds. It's completely different. You can't judge a 15-minute fight on three rounds of scorecards. It just doesn't make sense. My opinion, striking, 10-9. Grappling, 10-9. Octagon control, 10-9. Judge each round based on 30 points. Collective of 90 points at the end. Whoever wins, wins. I just think there needs to be something different to elevate the sport because it's different. It's not the same that it was in 93, 95. Obviously, they had scoring was a little bit different back then, but I don't know when they introduced the 10-9 system, but when they did, obviously they thought about boxing. So boxing was kind of the main reason why they introduced the 10-9 system. It's not boxing. You're not standing up the whole time. There's grappling exchanges. There's octagon control. There's pressure. There's damage. There's all these things that aren't accounted for in the 10-9 system that I think need to be accounted for. So I think it is a big problem. When it comes to the Paddy Pimblett decision, I think that makes the Sean O'Malley Peter Yan decision look like a joke. I think that was probably the worst decision all year. For one of the biggest stars all year. So is the UFC pushing these stars, or is the UFC, actually accounting for who wins? Does Dana White have say in these judges' ear, or are the judges actually, agreeing with an actual 29-28 for Paddy Pimblett, which is absolutely outrageous. I thought he lost all 3 rounds, to be honest. I thought Jared Gordon pushed the pace, landed the bigger shots. I think he was rocking him with that left hook over and over and over and over again, and Paddy had absolutely no answer for it. So it's really mind-boggling, because this is a sport that, that is, it's evolving. It's pretty quickly too. Ever since the Conor McGregor era, things kind of took off. People started watching. So it's definitely something that needs to be fixed. I don't know what you do. I don't know what they can do. I don't know what the process is for that, but something needs to change. And I think that's kind of a really big discussion with entering 2023, because we don't want to see these decisions anymore. These are ruining the fighters' lives. They lose half their purse when they lose. Jared Gordon deserved his entire purse that night. So it's not only hurting the fans, it's hurting the fighters too. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing to take away from here, is that the fighters are, struggling with this more than we are. And if we want to change, then they for sure want to change.
I completely agree. And I think a good segue into kind of what we are going to talk about next is my big problem with it too, is it doesn't seem like there's any sense of urgency or any even awareness that like this is an issue, or that like it needs to be fixed, or that there needs to be some sort of progression here to help further guide the sport along. Because I've kind of had this conversation not only with you already, DJ, but with a couple of different people. There's no doubt that the UFC has more eyes on it right now than ever. The sport's deeper than it's ever been. It's theoretically as big as it's ever been. And we still have these things that are holding it back from kind of transcending into that next wave where it can be even better. And my problem with it mostly is that Dana's response is don't trust the judges. How are we going to how is the sport going to grow if you just keep saying that over and over again? We're not trying to solve a problem here. I don't understand it. And it's gotten to a point where I do wonder if, obviously this is Dana's business, and who am I to kind of talk shit about running a company that big? I know nothing about it, literally zero. So obviously take it with a grain of salt. But I just wonder if Dana is the right person to be running this company through the next 10 years. And based on what's kind of happened with him in the last week, DJ, I feel like those talks can be a little bit more validated, because he obviously fucked up tremendously by, hitting his wife in public on New Year's Eve and blaming it kind of on alcohol. And I don't know. It was an absolute nightmare all in all, obviously. What do you think about Dana White and his future here in the UFC? Is there any like legitimacy to thinking that someone else could take this over at any given point in time, or is this just going to be another classic slap on the wrist? Who really cares? It's going to continue on with tragedy.
I think for now it's going to be a slap on the wrist. I don't think any like actual punishment will come out of this. I do think Dana's kind of been coasting since 2016, since they sold the company. Ever since then, he hasn't really like cared as much, or maybe he's got people that kind of handle things for him now, or maybe he doesn't have to do as much in his role. But ever since then, I feel like he's been kind of checked out. I mean, he doesn't care as much. He doesn't treat their fighters with respect as much as he used to. He used to be so passionate about this business and even promoting the fights. I remember when he got on stage for the Mayweather McGregor thing, he was screaming his, mind out, screaming, McGregor, here we go, blah, 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 whatever he was saying. But he was so passionate about it before. Now it's like, I don't think he cares as much. He's got money now. I mean, and there's other people who are ready to step in that spot. I know Mick Maynard, Sean Shelby. I think they all can do his job successfully. I don't even think the UFC needs Dana White anymore. So any type of punishment that's warranted for this, little incident that happened over New Year's Eve, I think it's warranted. I think he deserves it. I think something should happen, because that's not right. That's not what you do as a man with a woman. And I think that something needs to happen, because what happens when it happens with a fighter are they not going to be punished now? Or, that's the things you got to think about. And I think him moving forward as the president, sure, he might do it for a couple more years, but I really don't see him doing it for probably longer than 2024. I think he'll probably be out sooner rather than later. And I think this is kind of the first step to getting him out the door.
And the way that I look at it, it feels like it's almost necessary for the sport to take the next level. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows how it's all going to go down? But And again, the way I look at it too, DJ, imagine if Roger Goodell had publicly punched his wife. Like, the NFL would be going absolutely bananas. This is not okay. Dana White cannot go unscathed in this situation. Can't sweep this under the rug. Can't act like it's not a big deal. It really is. And hopefully there's some sort of repercussions, because that's obviously not okay, and everyone should know that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really curious to see how the UFC goes as a business this next year, man, because it feels like this has the potential to be a really kick-ass year. I mean, it ended on such a high note with so many different divisions. But there are still the same issues that are plaguing some fights and, leaving doubts in people's minds. And it's upsetting that I couldn't even imagine as a fighter. Could you imagine what Peter Yan feels like, feeling like he's lost these last 3 fights?
He wants to leave UFC. He may not even come back. We don't know yet. I'd be pissed. After the Aljo decision, sure, that was a little bit closer. I think Aljo could have got the nod there. I personally thought Peter Yan won that fight, but everyone can say Aljo won, and I would agree with them too. But that Sean O'Malley fight, I don't think he personally won. I think Peter Yan won. But if I'm Peter Yan, I'm going to PFL. I'm going to make $1 million there because I know I'm going to beat everyone in that division.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Yan's, I don't know if he's on the pound for pound list anymore off the top of my head. I don't think he is. But, man, he really could still have a case with the way that he's fought some of the top guys. And arguably, if the judges decided differently, he could be like top 5. You know what I mean?
I think he's the best guy in the division.
And it's crazy that judges' decisions impact it that much and impact the money that these guys are making. Like, clearly something has to change here. And when the head honcho of the company doesn't act interested in trying to make those adjustments, it's frustrating as a fan, right?
Oh, it's brutal. I hate watching it. It happens once a weekend. Every single weekend there's a bad decision, and it's all because of the judges. I mean, the fact that one judge, I forgot his name, maybe it was Derek Cleary. I know it wasn't him.
No,
was it him? The guy that flew up the Sabatello fight and then flew the next day and judged the fight for Patty. That was unbelievable. He should not be judging. If you took a 24-hour turnaround judging a fight, I think that's ridiculous. You should not be judging that fight. But yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think judging has been not the best as of late, and it showed a lot in 2022. I'm just hoping it doesn't happen in 2023. I think with a lot of the big stars coming back, I think McGregor's going to come back. Jones is going to come back. Hopefully Jones is going to come back. Obviously we say that every single year, but if these guys come back, like, the sport needs to be adjusted to the eyes that it's going to bring with John Jones and McGregor. We can't be having these decisions anymore. That's just, we can't. It ruins the sport. It makes the sport look laughable almost.
I completely agree. And especially, this is the last thing I'm going to say on it before we move on. Imagine a new fan watching that fight for the first time being like, that guy won? I'm sure not a lot of first-time watchers are watching, those certain instances all the time.
Who knows? Patty with Barstool? Maybe.
That's true. Like, yeah. Imagine people are like, this is the UFC? You know what I mean?
Right. It's sad. I don't like seeing it. I really don't.
I completely agree. Doug Crosby, by the way.
Doug Crosby. That's his name. Yep. Yeah. Doug Crosby.
We should have throw his name in the gutter while we're at it.
Yeah. Can we throw Sal in there too?
Yeah. Sal D'Amato. I don't know if those guys have working eyeballs.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully we get some better things out of this company and out of this sport in 2023, DJ. But before we officially move forward, let's talk about some of the top fights and the biggest moments from 2022, kind of recapping the year that we had in the UFC before moving forward. Give me your top fights from 2022, and then give me a top 3 if you can kind of cut it down.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
On the spot, but what do you think are your top 3 if you can?
Yeah, no, for sure. Number 1 for me personally is Matt Schnell and Sue. I can't pronounce his last name. I'm not going to even try to, but that fight was nuts. Matt Schnell was rocked with elbows left and right. I think he got rocked like 3 or 4 times and almost went. I think he went down. He went down a couple times too, and then he pulls off I think it was a triangle choke to end it, and Sue went out too. That was the best part about it. He went out cold. He wasn't just tapping. He went out cold. I think that was by far the best part about that fight. Back and forth. That's my number 1 for sure. Number 2 is probably Wonder Boy and Kevin Holland at the end of the year. I think that fight was nuts. The fact that they both agreed to stand the entire time. Kevin Holland, I think, scored a takedown and got up and then let Wonder Boy stand up, even though Wonder Boy is probably one of the best strikers to ever enter the UFC. That fight was nuts. Kevin Holland broke his hand. Wonder Boy looked fantastic. I think he's close to 40 years old now, and he showed that Kevin Holland was a newcomer in the welterweight division, not middleweight, obviously, but he went back down to welterweight. He looked good. He didn't have problems making weight, and that was a great fight. That was my second fight of the year, and then third fight of the year, I got kind of like a tie here. I got Chandler and Dustin, and then I also got Gane and Tuivasa. I think the fact that Tuivasa actually rocked Gane, knocked him down, no one saw that coming. We thought that Gane was going to dog walk Tuivasa. I think he was like a minus 500 favorite or something stupid like that. And Tuivasa showed heart. He showed I think he faked like a low blow once, and they started laughing in the middle of the octagon. And he's just great entertainment. Every single time Tuivasa fights, I'm watching 100%. And that fight with Gane was memorable. I'll never forget that fight. That was a great fight. And then last but not least, obviously, Chandler and Dustin. I think that was a really big fight. Obviously, I thought Dustin was kind of going to dog walk Chandler a little bit, but Chandler actually mixed it up for once. He didn't stand the whole time. He actually uses wrestling a little bit, which I would like to see him do that with the Conor McGregor fight if he does get that fight. But I want to see him start incorporating his wrestling. He's a good wrestler. He went to Mizzou. I think he was a walk-on there, and I think he was an All-American. Like, he's a good wrestler. He needs to utilize his wrestling more, especially with, the guys that came out of there, like Tyron Woodley, Ben Askren. It's a good school for wrestling. I mean, he's a good wrestler. He needs to utilize his wrestling more. He needs to stop, catering to the fans. He's already put on 3, 4, 5 really good fights. We don't need to see that anymore. Do your thing. Wrestle a little bit. That's what got you the Bellator gold back in the day. So I want to see that coming out of, Chandler moving forward. But that fight with Dustin was memorable. Dustin subbed him at the end there. He used his jiu-jitsu, which is where Dustin started to begin with. Everyone knows him for his hands, but that's his bread and butter. Thug jitsu or whatever he calls it. But he's the man on the ground, and he doesn't show that enough. But I'm glad to see Dustin, finally getting these W's that, have been deserved for years. That man works harder than anyone else in the UFC, and that was a great fight. I'll never forget that fight.
Me and you, two big stands of Dustin Poirier. Michael Chandler, to his credit, again, like you mentioned, made that fight closer than I thought it was going to be. On the feet, I thought Dustin was just going to pop him. Like, even I know fight talk is always just like kind of talking shit, and a lot of it isn't true. When Dustin said, "Oh, if he goes how he wants to fight against Gaethje, I'm gonna slug him," I'm like, yeah, he is. Like, I thought if Chandler wanted to do that, that's right up Dustin Poirier's alley. But yeah, to Chandler's credit, used his wrestling in that second round and dominated that round. It makes you think what he could be if he stopped trying to just kind of entertain the fans.
Right.
At this point, people are going to watch Michael Chandler from here on out. He's already done that. Like, he's got people tuned in. So, yeah, I am curious to see how he's going to go about that, particularly if he does wind up getting that Conor McGregor fight that people expect, hopefully some point in 2023. But as far as my top fights from 2022, I had number one, I also had Schnell and Sumun Darji. That was an absolute war where both guys looked like they were out 3 different times before whoever the judge was ended up calling it. That was a crazy, bloody back and forth brawl that I remember specifically. So I'm giving that number one. Number 2, I'm actually going to go with Cyril Gane and Tai Tuivasa. I think a big part of that too was the crowd. The crowd in France for me was maybe the best crowd of the year. Maybe the best
ever.
I mean, they were so, I like get goosebumps looking back and watching those highlights of like Cyril Gane after he wins to the fans going crazy, walking around the ring. I'm like, wow, that truly is what feeling like God must feel like. That would have been amazing. So, and credit to Tui in that fight too for knocking Cyril Gane down. Did not think that was going to happen. So he showed the warrior in him. Unfortunately, I don't think he's just top of the food chain in the heavyweight division like some of these big boys are. So he's kind of been on the wrong end of 2 beatings the last couple times out. But I do respect Tui for always wanting to get into a war with absolutely everybody. And then my third fight of the year, I'm going Hamzat and Burns. I feel like that was way earlier in 2022, so a lot of people have kind of brushed that down. But watching Gilbert Burns slug with Khamzat, knowing what we know about Khamzat some 10, 11 months later, that's so impressive, man. And we haven't seen Gilbert in quite a long time, but standing toe-to-toe with Khamzat, even if it was for just 15 minutes, like, that was insane, bro.
Yeah, it was wild. It was nuts. Like, no one thought Gilbert would touch Khamzat. Everyone thought Khamzat was going to take him down, submit him maybe. I don't know, dog walk him a little bit, but that was not the case. Gilbert Burns showed up that night. He showed out. He showed heart. He lasted all 15 minutes, and he won around. He won around against, probably the most up-and-coming fighter in the UFC right now.
Who else has anyone even ever come close to winning a round against Khamzat?
No, he's only lasted a round or two every single fight other than that one.
Yeah. So the fact that it even went 15 minutes and Gilbert won a round,
yeah,
I don't know, that was a crazy back and forth fight that I really liked. Honorable mention, I'm going Yuri and Glover. I'm still so sad that how do you tap with 18 seconds left, Glover? You're winning the fight. Just hang on. I don't understand. To this day, I don't understand what happened there. I mean, credit where credit's due. Yuri Prohaska battled back in that final round to stop that fight, but Glover should still be the champ. I mean, they would be fighting again, but
when he jumped that guillotine.
Yeah, why do you take him to the ground?
He had him rocked. He almost had him out of there.
Very frustrating as someone who had money on Glover Teixeira that night, but I give him credit for being above the age of 40 and going toe-to-toe with a very scary
43.
Yeah, going toe-to-toe and being up 3-1, according to 2 judges, I think, maybe all 3, with Yuri Prohaska, who's an absolute terrifying human being. So that's what I got for my fights of the year, DJ. Getting into some of the biggest moments, I think there are a couple obvious ones that we're both going to have. But talk to me through your biggest UFC moments from 2022.
For sure. Leon Edwards knocking out Usman in that last round when he was down and out. Those judges, or not the judges, sorry, the commentators, they counted him out. I remember Dean Thomas was like, he's defeated. He's not even looking his coach in the face. That's the sign of a fighter that's defeated. He's never going to come back from this. He's accepting a decision. That's what it's a moral victory, blah, 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 just getting to the decision with Usman. And then he knocked him out with that head kick that he timed so perfectly. Not only that, the week before that, prior to that, he was setting up that kick all week long on video. Like, there was videos of him setting up that kick, that fake jab into the left high kick. He was doing it all week long, and he landed it. It's one of the most beautiful stories you've ever seen. The way he cried, the way, on the mic, he said, "Mama, I did it." He FaceTimed his mom on the way back in the locker room, and she was crying. He was crying his eyes out. Like, you don't see that emotion out of fighters. I mean, these guys are all, super egoed up, and, I don't cry. I'm a fighter. I'm a man. I'm a big macho guy, but he showed such heart and determination to end that fight. And the fact that he had the endurance and stamina to throw that kick that late in the fight, it's insane, the training that man must do. That was definitely my biggest moment of the year by far. I don't think we'll ever experience anything like that again, especially as big as an underdog he was going into that fight. But my second moment of the year is for sure Nate Diaz finally leaving the UFC after UFC 279. After that card fell apart, he was supposed to fight Khamzat. I'm so glad he didn't fight him.
Could you imagine?
That would have been terrible. I wouldn't even enjoyed watching that. That's one of the guys that I grew up watching. I don't want to see him lose like the way Kevin Holland did to Khamzat. Like, it was just a great moment to see him finally be let go, freedom. He's hated the UFC for I don't know how long, and it's just good to see him test free agency finally and see what his value is actually worth. Because at the end of the day, that's all we want. We want fighters to get paid. We want them to get paid what they're worth. And Nate Diaz is the biggest star in the UFC right now that's active, that actually fights. I mean, obviously we can say Conor, but he doesn't really fight that much. He stayed, he fought a lot. He fought his entire career making minimal money, and it's good to see him get the shine that he deserves. And I think him in the free agency market is going to do a lot of crazy things, whether it's bare knuckle, PFL, boxing, whatever he does, I'm watching. But yeah, other than that, I had my final big moment of the year was Damon Jackson. He earned a win over Pat Sabatini, who's a really, really tough guy. Pat Sabatini is one of the best guys in that division. And at a plus 185 underdog, his brother died 3 days prior to that fight. He won in tremendous fashion, and he cried like a little, baby, which he should. I would be too. But he looked so good in that fight, and that's one of my biggest moments of the year, just because I remember that so like vividly. I remember him winning and crying, and on the mic he was crying, and he deserved that win, and it was good to see him cash in at a plus 185 underdog.
Damon Jackson has a big fight this weekend as well. See if he can carry over that momentum. That was a very cool moment. As far as what I had, DJ, I also had, obviously, Leon coming back and head kicking Kamaru Usman. I thought it was also cool not only to see him training that kick throughout the week. Have you seen the video that Wonder Boy did where he was talking about how Usman did that weird head dip?
Oh, no, I actually haven't seen that, no.
You should find it after this, but there's literally like a preview video that Wonder Boy was doing, and he says that exact same thing. He's like, whenever he throws a right jab, he does this weird head duck sometimes, and literally in the 5th round, that same exact thing happened. Leon kicks him in the head. The rest is history. I also had Alex Pereira KOing Izzy in the 5th round, kind of controversially, semi-controversially. I thought it
was warranted. I thought he should have been out of there.
I thought it was the right call. He had Izzy head down. Against one of the most powerful strikers in the entire world. I think it's a very wise decision to end that fight and have Israel Adesanya live to fight another day. But no denying that Pereira coming in, he's got 4 fights in the UFC and he's already the champion.
Crazy.
And it's Izzy 3 times now. That's got to be one of the biggest storylines. And Izzy deserves to have that rematch happen once again. So they're going to be meeting up here sometime soon, and it'll probably be another epic battle. My last one that I'll talk about, I'll have one last one, and then an honorable mention. Michael Chandler's front kick on Tony Ferguson. It was probably the most viral UFC clip of the year. Probably the best knockout that I've seen since I've been watching the UFC. Just an absolute front kick right down the pipe. And has Tony ever been knocked out or stopped other than that? Was that the first one?
He got stopped with the Gaethje fight, but he was still standing when he got stopped. So we've never seen him get knocked out like that.
At the time, obviously, Nate fucking submitted him in whatever that.
Right, which is completely different. Yeah, how cold, lights out. That was the first time ever.
Yeah, that was absolutely crazy. And I do feel a little bit bad for that picture of they caught Tony, like how terrible he looked when the kick made it.
For the Frankie one with Cheeto back in the day. I think that was at MSU last year.
That was a crazy one too. That was in 2021 though, because that's when I first got into UFC. I think that was kind of similar to what my honorable mention is going to be, where Cheeto had kicked Dom Cruz. I'm pretty sure Cheeto was losing that fight too, right? I know he was losing to Cruz. He was also losing that fight to Frankie, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's the comeback kid. That kid, 5-round fight, Cheeto wins 9 times out of 10, no matter who it is. That he'll knock you out. He'll spark you out. That dude's no joke. No matter what you're winning or losing, that dude will knock you out 4th, 5th round with ease. And he's the king of that.
I'm so excited to see him face Corey Sandhagen. That is one of my favorite fights of the year. If it ends,
I cannot wait. I don't even know what date. I think it's like February something, but I cannot wait for that.
That is a bopper, DJ. But getting into our next segment that we got here, let's talk about what we think is going to be happening, or take some predictions as to who's going to be the champion for each division at the end of 2023. I think it's just a fun way to kind of start this show off, and also going back this time next year, looking back at these predictions and seeing how probably brain dead we were about some of these guesses.
No, yeah, of course. This is always fun to do because DraftKings does the futures odds, so you can see all these odds live if you want to take any of them on DraftKings. But yeah, no, I'm just going to go ahead and rattle through them all. We'll start with the women's 115 division. I think at the end of the year, Whaley will probably be champion. I think Rose will probably move up to 125, so I don't really see that rematch maybe happening. I mean, if it does, cool, but I still think Whaley might take it. I just think she's a different fighter now. She's a lot, more experienced. I think Rose probably had the experience advantage earlier on in Whaley's career when they first fought, but I think now Whaley just takes it 9 times out of 10. I really do, especially after that Rose-Carla fight. But at 125 for women's division, I have Valentina reclaiming the championship. I do not think there's anyone in that division that will touch her. Other than Tatiana Suarez, former 115er, now a 125er. I know she's had a lot of health issues over the past 4 years. I don't think she has fought since that card in Chicago against Nina Ansaroff, Nunes' wife. She hasn't fought since then, and that's probably why no one's talking about her, but she's back. She took a fight against Montana De La Rosa, or whatever her name is, the submission girl. Tatiana is going to take that fight with ease. I think she's the dark horse of that division moving forward this year. I think it's just a matter of time whether she gets that title shot. Moving on to 135, I do think the UFC is finally going to make that rematch happen between Valentina and Nunes. And I do think Valentina wins that rematch. I think she's the better fighter all around. I think Juliana Pena exposed some holes with Amanda. The tired factor, the motivation factor, I don't think it's there for Amanda anymore. I really don't. I think she's accomplished everything she's wanted to accomplish in her career. And I think that's going to be ultimately her downfall at the end of the day when it comes to facing Valentina for that third time. So I do have Valentina becoming the champion at 135 too, even though she is the smaller person.
That's bold.
That is bold.
I feel like we're in agreement basically on all the women division. I have Zhang Weili, who's obviously the champ right now, still going to be the champ at the end of the year. Valentina, it's just no one's even really come close to beating her or even had a sniff. And who was the last person that came close to beating Valentina?
Talia Santos. She could have won that fight until that hematoma happened.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That was bad. But yeah, I think, do you really see the UFC making the fight between Nunes and Valentina, and why now?
I do think they do, because I just don't think there's anyone for Amanda to fight. Unless Ketlin Vieira or Raquel Pennington come out this weekend and completely knock one of each other out, I don't think that fight really happens. I don't see Ketlin Vieira or Pennington fighting for the belt after this fight, no matter what happens, unless they literally spark each other out clean cold and it's the craziest knockout ever. I just don't see it happening. And I think Valentina's running out of contenders too. Amanda's running out of contenders. I just think it makes a lot of sense, especially on International Fight League out of all weeks in July.
I agree with you. Both those girls are running out of legitimate contenders. It's just they're trying to find ways to figure out who can come in and who hasn't faced her before, and how to actually still sell these fights without people being like, hey, we've already seen this. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, all right, that's what we got for the women's divisions. Getting into the men's now, we'll start out with the flyweight division. Current champion Deiveson Figueiredo, interim champion Brandon Moreno. What do you got as your prediction? Who's going to be the champ at the end of the year, and who's your sleeper for this division?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. Just because I think Figgy, no matter if he wins or loses this fight, I think he goes up to 135 after this. I think that weight cut is just way too much for him. I mean, he walks around at like 170 and he cuts down to 125. That's massive. He's a big dude. I mean, I did see him at the presser when they did the little media day with Brandon and Figgy. And he looked a lot slimmer than he usually does coming into fights, so I will say that. But I do think no matter win or lose, I think Brandon Moreno will be the champion at the end of the year, just because I think Figgy goes up, and I really don't think there's anyone in that division that can beat Brandon Moreno other than Figgy. So I think Brandon Moreno will be the champion at the end of the year, and I think my honorable mention would be Manel Kape. Or Kipe, or whatever, how you would pronounce it. That dude's knees are nuts. Sure, he's lost to a couple guys in the division, but those are really early on in his career. I think he lost his UFC debut, which is completely different than any other fight. You know, it's the first time you're fighting in front of 30,000, 20,000 people. It's completely different than those Joe Schmo, promotions where you're fighting in a couple thousand people. So I get that. A lot of people lose their UFC debut and become champions later on in their career. So I do think he is a sleeper, and I think he's the only sleeper in that division.
Yeah, this division is very thin, probably the thinnest division among all of them. For some reason, I just get the feeling that Brandon Moreno is going to be the champ some way or another by the end of the year. I am really interested to see who is going to win this fourth fight between those two.
Are you though? I'm really not interested in seeing it. I really am not.
I'm not really as much interested in the fight itself as I am to the result, I guess.
Yeah, I agree.
I just want some closure here, and this is it. And maybe even this division goes bye-bye after this because...
Honestly, I wouldn't be disappointed. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, it's just not deep. There's not legitimate... in my mind, maybe 2023 is a big year for it, but I'm going with Brendan Moreno. It just feels like that's going to happen one way or another, that he's going to be the champ by the end of the year. My sleeper, I had Mateusz Nicolau. He's won 6 fights in a row. I know he's a little bit further down in the rankings. He's beaten he's beaten all ranked guys in his last 4, I want to say. So maybe he's someone to keep an eye on, but I really do believe it's going to be Figueiredo or Moreno. The only reason I didn't say Figueiredo is he's not much of a sleeper, and I could realistically see him going up a weight class.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So moving on into bantamweight, obviously the champ is Aljamain Sterling. This division is just absolutely loaded, and maybe it was the one that gave me the most difficulty thinking about who is going to be the champion at the end of the year. Who do you got for me, DJ?
Yeah, for sure. This is by far the hardest division to pick from. With Henry Cejudo coming back, Sean O'Malley finally making his way up those rankings. Umar, everyone knows about Umar, but hey, he can be fighting for the belt towards the end of the year. He's 2-3 wins away. If he gets, a couple fights, early on in the year, I could see him fighting for the belt towards the end of the year. And I think Umar beats everyone in the division. But that being said, I do think that fight with Henry and Aljamain, I think it's a toss-up. I really don't know who's going to win. So my champion at the end of the year is Henry Cejudo. Just because I think he's got the wrestling advantage, and the striking advantage, honestly, with Aljamain. But it's just whether when they fight with Aljamain's, torn bicep going on. So I don't know when they're going to fight. But I do think at the end of the year, it's either going to be either Henry Cejudo or Umar, depending on, if Umar gets that shot or not. But if Umar gets that shot, it's Umar. If it's not Umar, then I think Henry Cejudo will have the belt at the end of the year.
I'm sticking with Aljamain. I don't know why. Maybe I just feel like he's so much bigger than Henry is. And Henry's this is a long time for Henry to be off. And I get that he's not old by any means. And obviously he's got the wrestling pedigree. You could make his case over anyone's. I just feel like Aljamain is so long and lengthy, and he knows distance really well. He's not a great striker, but he also doesn't take a lot of damage on the feet either, at least recently. So I'm sticking with Alja. My sleeper, though, is the winner of the Cheeto Sandhagen fight. I don't know who's winning that fight. Whoever comes out of that fight as a winner, I think does have a shot to beat either of these guys.
Who do you think wins that fight?
I think Corey beats him. I really do.
I think so, too.
I think Cheeto's shown us that he's beatable, but if you let him hang around, he's going to fuck you up.
Yeah, for sure.
You need to, if you want to beat Cheeto, I feel like the path to beating Cheeto is getting on him early and putting him down. You can't let him linger into those later rounds because he just has such sneaky ways to put you out. We've seen it now twice. Dom Cruz looked as good as how good did Dom Cruz look in those first 2 rounds?
He looked like the old Dom Cruz. He looked like 135-pound champ Dom Cruz.
He looked great, and Cheeto put him night-night, and everyone forgot. So yeah, I think the path to victory for Corey Sandhagen is going at him early and often, and the longer that fight goes, the probably better it is for Cheeto.
Right. I agree completely.
But I'm so excited for that division this year. There are so many up-and-coming contenders legitimately in that division. Really
by far the most stacked division in the UFC, next to the 155-pound division.
Absolutely. And sadly, the featherweight division, 145, just really is kind of in a lull right now, Deej, because Volk has just obviously made his reign very prominent with a 50-45 over Max Holloway. Doing that to Max is an absolute statement. I feel like we're both going to predict Volk to be the champ at the end of the year. Is it even worth mentioning a sleeper, or are we that confident that Volk is the man here?
I am that confident, but at the same time, Ilia Topuria. That dude's got bombs in his hands. He's originally a jiu-jitsu guy. We haven't seen him much on the ground. We don't know what he can do on the ground in the UFC so far. Obviously, we've seen him in early on his career, rack up a ton of submissions, but that's an interesting fight. They're both around the same size. I think Volkanovski might have the advantage on the feet. I think Topuria has the advantage in the power. I think when it goes to the ground, I think they're both pretty even. If not, I'll give Topuria the edge. So I do think if that fight happens after this Islam fight, it's going to be closer than a lot of people think. But at the same time, I still think Volkanovski takes it, and he is my champion at the end of the year.
Yeah, I have the same thing. I just don't see – there's no – Volk's been there and done that. He's been to the deep water, and now it feels like he's only gotten better. Like, I feel like he's just adding more and more to his arsenal, and the statement that he made by beating Max is just – to me, that was one of the best performances, if not the best performance all year long, doing it against that high caliber of an opponent. My sleepers that I had were same with you. I had Ilia Topuria, and I also had Arnold Allen. I don't know. He probably hasn't had a legitimate enough opponent to put him in that pedigree yet, but I don't think there's also any denying the sparks that this kid has with his hands.
Yeah, he's one fight away. He's a Max Holloway. He's one fight away from entering that championship, talk. And I think like I said, he's one fight away. If he gets that Max Holloway fight, he looks good. Who knows? He might knock Max Holloway out. I mean, we've never seen it before. He's never even been knocked down before. But if anyone's going to knock him down, it's Arnold Allen.
Yeah, that would be a fight I am very much so interested to see here in 2023. Find some way to make this featherweight division a little bit more interesting here, UFC. Mm-hmm. Moving on down to 155, DJ. We got our boy. Our boy will never see another line like it again, sadly.
No.
Islam Makhachev is the champion at 155. We knew he was going to be the champion at 155. We should have put our life savings on it. We could have bought our kids' houses by now. Is he going to be the champ at the end of the year? And why is the answer yes?
It's yes for a million reasons. That man is pound for pound the best fighter in the UFC right now. The things that Khabib taught him, the things that he learned from him, it's just going to elevate his career that much more. I do not think, and you got to think about it, the dark horses of the division that we're talking about is like Arman and Fiziev. Sure, he hasn't faced Fiziev yet, but I think he takes him down pretty handily. And Arman, he's shown that he beat Arman. I know Arman took that fight on, a couple weeks notice, and it was early on in Arman's career, and I think it was his UFC debut, so that changes everything too. But Islam beat him already, and that's a dude that we're going to be talking about for a long time. He's super young. But at the end of the day, Islam is the best fighter in the UFC right now, and he's the best fighter in that division. That's why he'll be the champion at the end of the year.
And 155 is a scary, no-joke division in and alone of itself. There are some very for-real contenders in this division, and I just don't see very many paths to victory for very many other people because of what Islam's able to do, and like you mentioned, the training that he's gone through his entire life. He just looks like he's battle tested and ready for this moment. Like he's been waiting for this, working hard for this, and now it's really time for him to fully explode onto the scene. I also expect Islam Makhachev to still be the champion at the end of the year. I do think Alexander Volkanovski is going to give him a good run for his money because Volk is one bastard. But I do still think Islam comes out victorious in that one. He's the champ at the end of the year. My same sleepers that I had, DJ, were Rafael Fiziev and Arman Tsarukyan. So I'm kind of thinking alike there at 155. Moving up to 170 here, an interesting division, I will say. I think it's certainly gotten more interesting since you and I started talking UFC. We now have Leon Rocky Edwards, of course, as the champion, knocking out Kamaru Usman. Is Kamaru getting that belt back by the end of 2023? What do you think?
I think he will get that belt back, but will he hold it at the end of the year? That's kind of the real question for me. I don't know what they're going to fight in March now. I don't know what's going on with that. I know Usman's got some hand issues are going on, and they haven't scheduled it yet. So I don't know if that fight's going to happen in March. So when it does happen, kind of matters about who's going to be the champion at the end of the year. But I do think Usman gets the belt back. I think he probably wins that fight pretty handily. I think he avoids that left high kick late in that fight, and I don't think that happens again. I think that was a miracle sent from God to Leon Edwards that night. But I do think he will be the champion at the end of the year, but I think it all depends on if Khamzat is at 170 or 185. I do not know.
Yeah, Khamzat is kind of the boogeyman, regardless of what the UFC decides to do with him. I personally just have a hard time seeing him getting the nod to be like, yeah, go fight at 170 again, even though he weighed in ridiculously overweight, 8 pounds overweight, and looked like he did it on purpose and didn't even fucking care at all about it. Like, just in the worst way possible, missed weight. And it's kind of an unforgivable manner. So I would certainly understand why the UFC, if they do elect to tell him to, hey, we got to bump it up here. You're not a 170 guy. But I do agree that Kamaru Usman is going to get that belt back. Look, his performance was so dominant up until that head kick. I was genuinely snoozing on the couch watching.
I was too. It was kind of not that greatest fight ever, honestly. Other than the first round and last round.
It started impressive because Leon took him down, and I was like, oh, shit, Leon took him down. And then
Kamaru, that was weird. That was weird.
Then Kamaru was like, yeah, I'm going to work. Absolutely dogged him. You referenced earlier, Din Thomas is saying that Leon Edwards is a broken man. Even DC was all over Leon Edwards too, and
they were burying him at his funeral.
They wrote the obituary.
Yeah.
But Kamaru looked terrific the entire fight, really, until that moment. Sure, he got taken down, but he was never in the most dangerous situations, and he knew that the odds of that happening again probably weren't in Leon's favor. He took it to him those next 3 rounds. So we know that Kamaru's having some health issues right now, but I do feel like by the end of the year, he's going to be healthy enough to get that shot. And I think he's going to get the belt. My boogeyman that I have in that division, DJ, is Shavkat Rakhmonov. What do you think about him here in 2023?
Yeah, he's definitely someone to talk about. It's all about kind of the fights he takes to get him up the ladder. I mean, taking fights against Jeff Neal, I mean, sure, Jeff Neal he was my sleeper. He was my honorable mention.
Real deal, Jeff Neal, baby.
He was my honorable mention to win the belt a couple of years, 2021 or maybe it was the end of 2022. But he's got to take better fights. He's got to take, Colby Covington. He's got to fight Gilbert Burns. So I don't know if he will get there towards the end of the year, but he definitely is someone that is championship worthy. The way he disposed of Neil Magny pretty easily is like saying a lot, because Neil Magny, we know he's battle tested. He's fought everyone in the division. So I do think he is a sleeper. He's definitely worth, an honorable mention. It's just whether he will be ready to fight for a title towards the end of the year.
Completely fair. Moving on to middleweight now, another division that's kind of been shaken up here at the end of 2022. Alex Pereira. I still don't know. Pereira. People have been...
Pereira. You said it right the first time. Pereira.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, people pronounce, even in the UFC, everyone says it differently. So I've been trying to figure out the right way. Scary Brazilian is basically just what I could say, because he has hands of stone. That would be his nickname, Poatan. He's the current champion for the middleweight division, beating Israel Adesanya for the 3rd time in his career. What do you think happens at the middleweight division by the end of 2023, Deej?
Yeah, I think Khamzat will be the champion at 185 towards the end of the year. I really do. I think he's going to move up. I think he's a stylistic matchup nightmare for both Izzy and Pereira. The only people I think he would have problems with is like a Robert Whittaker, but I don't think Robert Whittaker is probably going to fight for the belt anytime soon, just because he's had so many shots before. But yeah, I definitely think Khamzat will be the champion at the end of the year. I think Izzy will get his belt back, and I think Izzy will eventually fight Khamzat after Khamzat fights, like a Paulo Costa or like Sean Strickland. I don't know, whoever. And I think Khamzat does get his title shot towards the end of the year, and I think he will become champion.
I agree. Who do you think Khamzat would rather face, Pereira or Adesanya?
Pereira, 100%.
I
really do.
I agree too.
He's just an easier guy to take down.
Can you repeat that? I apologize.
I think he's just an easier guy to take down. I really do.
I mean, if Izzy was on his back,
that's saying a lot. Khamzat will take his back in 10 seconds then.
That's no diss to Adesanya either. I thought that was the smart way. Like, his path to victory in that fight was, we were talking before that fight, like, I wonder if Izzy grapples here. And I thought it was very wise for him to do so.
He looked good doing it. I just think he got tired doing it. I don't think he's used to doing that.
Yeah, I agree. I think Khamzat is just such a matchup nightmare for either of those guys, and they're the clear cuts at the top of the division. Just don't see a path to victory for them against Khamzat.
I don't either.
He's the boogeyman wherever he is. So I do have Khamzat Chimaev as the champion at the middleweight division by the end of the year. Moving on down into 205 now, DJ. The current champion is NA because apparently Dana White said, fuck Ankalaev, even though he should be the light heavyweight champion.
Poor fucking guy.
Dana White, like an 8-year-old who doesn't like the flavor ice cream he got, says this is a bad fight. We're not having any champion. 2 new guys are coming in to fight for the belt. What's happening at 205 by the end of the year, bro?
Dude, it's a fucking mess. That division is so weird, so bizarre. I thought Magomed won that fight. I thought he should have been the champion at the end of the night. Obviously, everyone else says otherwise.
So did Jan.
Jan did not even come close to winning that fight. The fact that it was a draw actually makes me sick. That's another judging issue that we were talking about earlier. But yeah, towards the end of the year, I do have Magomed actually getting the belt back. I think no matter who wins with Jamal Hill or Glover, I think Magomed will piece him up no matter what, whether it's wrestling or on the feet. I think he's a better fighter everywhere. So I do have Magomed as my champion towards the end of the year, and my honorable mention is Yuri. The only reason he's an honorable mention is because I don't know if he's going to come back or not. I don't know if he'll be back by the end of the year. I know he's progressing very well, but I don't know what that means. I really don't. I heard it was one of the worst injuries the UFC has ever seen when it comes to a shoulder. So I don't know what it's going to look like for Yuri. But I do think if Yuri and Magomed were to fight, it's a 50-50 for me. I do not know who wins that fight. So that's why I have Magomed as my champion and Yuri as my honorable mention, just because of the fact that I don't know if he's going to be healthy or not.
My one thing I will say about Magomed is randomly in some fights, he just stops throwing anything. Like his output in meaningful fights is really, really garbage sometimes. And I did think he beat Jan. I thought it was pretty clear that he beat Jan. I can't believe 2 judges had 3-0 Jan Blachowicz in that fight. That actually blew my mind. But I just haven't seen the dominant Magomed that I've wanted to see yet. So I have some concerns. If Yuri Prochazka is healthy enough to fight in 2023, I think he's going to be the champion. My boogeyman sleepers for this division, I got my boy Jamal Hill. I just got to throw him in there because he's my guy. But I think Alexander Rakic is someone to keep an eye on. I don't know what his timeline's like ever since he tore his ACL against Jan, but he was really looking good early on in that fight. And I think he's one of the few guys in this 205 division that has legitimate champion upside. So whenever he returns, I'm definitely interested to see more out of Alexander Rakic. Last but not least, DJ, we got the one you probably are the most interested to talk about the most, my guy, the big old heavyweights. This division has actually turned into being good after it was kind of dog shit forever. Francis Ngannou we've been waiting for him to come back for quite some time. We've been waiting for his supposed fighting partner, John Jones, for even longer. What's going on in the heavyweight division in 2023, dude?
I'm hearing rumors that March might happen. And if he's not ready, if Francis isn't ready, John's going to fight someone else, whether it's Curtis Blades or Gane. So John's fighting this year. That's what everything I'm hearing is telling me John's going to fight this year. And if John fights this year, John's going to be champion this year. I think he's by far the best fighter to ever set foot in the UFC. He's got wrestling. He's got stand-up. He's got kicks. He's got movement. He's got control. He's got jiu-jitsu. He's got everything you need to be the best fighter in the world. And he is the best fighter in the world. How long he's been off, that might dictate what's going to happen with him. You know, he hasn't fought since 2019 in February against Dominic Reyes. I think that was the last time he fought, and that was a questionable decision. Dominic Reyes possibly could have won that fight, and Dominic Reyes has not looked good since then. So it's really, it hasn't been a good win looking back on it for John. He made that fight way too close, and I think he didn't dictate the pace as much as he thought he would in that fight. But yeah, my champion at the end of the year is John Jones, just because I've always been a John Jones fan. That's a very biased pick. But my honorable mentions for this division, it's not Francis either. I do not have him in my honorable mentions. I do not think Francis. I think he's got power. I think he showed up against Gane. I thought he fought one of the best fights he could have fought in that night, even though he had that knee injury going on. But he's not in my honorable mentions. I don't know if his heart's in it anymore. I know he's got some, questions with the UFC. I don't really know if he's focused on fighting at all. I think he's just more focused about money. And as soon as you reach that money conversation, look at Conor McGregor. You kind of bow out a little bit. Your mental space kind of changes. So my honorable mentions for this division are Gane. I have a couple just because this division is so stacked now. So I've Gane, I have Pavlovich. That dude's hands are absolutely insane. But I don't know. I saw him on the ground one time with Alistair Overeem. Alistair Overeem, kind of dog walked him a little bit in that fight. So if John Jones was able to take him to the ground, I think it's night over. And then I have Curtis Blades. Curtis Blades is still someone that is very championship material in this division. He's got the best wrestling in this division, even though he went to Harper College, right by Palatine, Illinois, where we're from. So I think he is a dark horse in this division. I think the fact that he lost to Francis twice already kind of hurts his title shot contention. But at the end of the day, I think Blades is still one of the best guys in that division, and his hands are getting better every single day, and he shows that in every single fight that he's had. So he's definitely my dark horse of the division. I think if you match Curtis Blades up with Francis nowadays, I think Curtis Blades wins. That's just my personal preference. You can disagree with me if you want, but I just think Curtis Blades has the wrestling to wrestle all 5 rounds. I don't think anyone in the UFC division and the heavyweight division can do that. I don't think anyone can wrestle all 5 rounds besides Curtis Blades.
So here's my thoughts about this heavyweight division. We know if John and Francis is ever going to happen, that's the matchup that seems like everybody wants. Then there's Cyril Gane, who's clearly proven he should be in that upper echelon in heavyweight. It almost feels to me like either Sergey Pavlovich or Curtis Blades has to be the odd man out, at least for 2023. And to me, it feels like it's going to be Curtis Blades, sadly. I feel like the way Pavlovich beat Tuivasa, just kicked the fuck out of him in 15 seconds. That's kind of the product that the UFC wants, and the explosion that can sell an audience. So I feel like Sergey, as sad as it is, because Curtis Blades has shown us a lot of improvement, and it sucked that he also got gypped in that fight against Tom Aspinall by Tom separating his shoulder like 10 seconds in as well. We didn't really get to see much of Curtis. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think the champion is either going to be John, if it ever freaking happens, or to me, it's going to be the winner of Sergey Pavlovich and Cyril Gane. That fight to me just feels like it has to happen. That feels like the fight to me that has to happen for the next guy to get the title shot. What do you think about that, DJ, before we kind of wrap this up?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great fight. I think Gane and Pavlovich is the fight to make. I think that the winner of that fight is the clear-cut number 1 contender. And I do think you leave Curtis Blades out just because he has lost to Francis twice. And he won the fight with Aspinall, but he blew his knee out so early that it's like, do we count that as a win? So I thought that fight was going to be a lot more interesting, and I really wanted to see that fight play out for, a couple rounds. It was sad, kind of ended in only, I think, like 15 or 20 seconds or something like that. It was first leg he threw or something like that. I can't even remember. But yeah, no, that's the fight to make. That's 100% the fight to make is Gane versus Pavlovich. Winner of that fight fights the winner of John and Francis. If the John and Francis fight doesn't happen, who do you stick in with John?
How do you make it Curtis Blades, though?
The only reason why I say Curtis Blades is because that's what the UFC said in the beginning of the year. They said if Francis is out, they're going to throw Curtis Blades in that picture or the scenario.
I think I'd rather see Cyril, though.
I would too, personally. I would rather see Cyril Gane versus John Jones. Could you imagine that fight? That would be the most technical stand-up fight that we've ever seen by far.
That would be incredible.
Also, it might be boring though too. That fight might be boring as hell. They might be standing looking at each other the whole time throwing feints. So
who knows? I mean, we once saw Derek Lewis versus Francis Ngannou be one of the most least entertaining fights of all time, and who would have guessed that?
Yeah, I was live for that one.
I'm sorry to bring up some bad memories, bro, but hopefully we're going to have a really good year of 2023, not just with the product of what we get out of the UFC. Hopefully our gambling numbers going along with it, or what they were, if not better, for 2022. DJ, a lot of fun doing this first episode, bro. I'm excited for doing the show, hopefully twice every week. We've already been going for an hour here, so we're not going to touch on UFC, this upcoming UFC fight night on Saturday night all that much. But before we get out of here, any picks at all or any leans or anything you'd consider gambling on this card?
Yes, I do. I have one pick and one pick only just because this card's a little funky, but I do have Imavov beating Sean Strickland. I think he's the fresher fighter. I think Sean Strickland just took a fight. You know, he was the last main event on the pay-per-view. He even said himself in an interview with the Schmo that he hasn't been, you know, he's been eating a lot. He hasn't been training. He hasn't really been doing much. Sure, he trains a lot other than opposed to, you know, normal UFC fighters, just because I don't think Sean Strickland has much of a social life. I think the only life he has really is fighting. So I'm sure he's been in the gym. But at the same time, Imavov was, you know, expected to face Kelvin Gastelum, who's tough test. And he's ready to go 5 rounds right now. He looks incredible shape. I saw some pictures today. I was like, holy shit, this dude looks like a fucking sculpture right now. This dude is yoked out of his mind. He's got Cyril Gane in his corner this weekend. I think at a damn near pick 'em, I gotta take Imavov every single time. So I threw a full unit on Imavov for this weekend. Hopefully he gets it done, and hopefully we start the year off hot.
Love to hear it. All right, I think that is going to do it here for the very first episode of DJMMA. To all those who tuned in, on behalf of both of us, let me say thank you very much. I know we're both really excited to start doing this show here every week. And yes, the UFC is coming back this Saturday, January 14th, not with the best card, but the one after that in Brazil. That's when things are going to start heating up. So be sure to keep a lookout for our upcoming shows. We'll have much more on the gambling scene coming up later in 2 weeks. And make sure to go and show some support by smashing the like button down below on this video, and go and subscribe to the channel on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Both places are 100% for free. We'd really appreciate the support. It means a lot to us. So thanks again to everyone for tuning in. For my co-host DJ Postilion, myself, Jack Bushman, we'll catch you next time on DJ MMA.